Well, now that we are talking about this collection of books we call the Wakingpedia, I think we should talk more about Wyndham Lewis because he was very important in what McLuhan went to develop, and he also had a great influence in Joyce.
Mm.
And his work is not known at all. He hasn't been really understood. He was like the intoxicated god, the enemy of the stars. Only a very few got what he was saying. Like McLuhan calls him the one-man army.
Yeah.
He was a Templar.
Yeah.
And
One-man army.
he was fighting the world.
Yeah.
And he paid a very high price of not being recognized, although he was so important, and what he was saying has changed the mind, the way we see medias, because he influenced McLuhan so deeply.
Mm. He liked the telephone. He would get up in the morning, take out the phone book, and randomly find a name. Then he would call that name's phone number. And when that person picked up the phone, they had an experience they never forgot. Lewis would then start yelling at them, berating them, telling them to wake up. Who knows what he said to them. But he would do this randomly, just call people out of the blue and go into them.
Yes, but he was saying the same thing. The artist has to make people see the world and see the invisible environment. And I suppose one of his techniques was this extreme electroshock.
He, in the James Joyce recording where I talked to James Joyce long after he's died, and I'm talking to him through the evergreens, he said the hardest thing to notice is the present, the actual present. And so then you think of what Lewis wrote. The artist appears to be writing a history of the future because only the artist knows the nature of the present. Same idea as Joyce's.
He could see that we are all part of this epic journey, but he was somehow angry that most men are like sentimental tourists. He said they're taking part of these journeyings. How do you say journeyings?
Journey.
No, he had a special word, journeyings. Journeyings.
Journeying, yes, journeying.
He could see that all men are part of the fall and the returning. It's not a banal, trivial thing to be here on the planet.
So I have here my copy of The Art of Being Ruled. And it's paperback. It was put out by Black Sparrow Press, which is now bankrupt and gone. And so Ginkgo Press took over the rights to the Lewis books, and they also reprint the McLuhan books. But I don't think they do much with the Lewis books yet. So I'll open the back pages, and these are my notes. So as I read the book, I get ideas and put the page number. This very nicely laid out. That's 2 pages there. The very first note is quadrophenia. We'll have to see what that is. And then the next 2 pages, look at that.
Wow.
Bob Scholar. Bob the Scholar.
The heavy metal song.
Yeah, heavy metal band.
But another very important idea of Wyndham Lewis was that we were at the end of progress, and art fits this vortex, but at the same time has the power to stop the vortex.
Yes.
Just to be in this eternal now.
Right. And did I show this one? The one with this picture? My notes around it. That's a famous picture. He's older than that one. When he was young, he looked like Captain Beefheart, which is interesting. And Zappa was like James Joyce.
Wow.
No, he didn't look like James Joyce, but he kind of had a similar sensibility in what he wrote about.
That's the Scully of Bob making the comments on the margins.
Yes, correcting Lewis. I was correcting Lewis. Now,
Overlay,
the thing is,
completing.
Now, the funny thing is, I'm struck at how neatly I did this. I was very careful with my notes. So we go to quadrophenia. So it says 204, the middle of 204. What is going to be 204 middle? Okay, here's what it says. This is the essay, The Family and Feminism. He's writing about feminism way back there. These were written in the 1920s. What was it? The Family and Feminism. What's the section? 204. Enjoy the grunting. Yes, there's a site, part 7, The Family and Feminism. Part 8 is The Vicious Circle. Part 9, Man and Shaman. Part 10, Socialist Theory. Okay, part 5, Natures and Puppets. But part 7 is Family and Feminism. Let's show that. Oh, it's this stuff. Family and Feminism. So you go to 204, well, 199, The Matriarchate and Feminine Ascendancy. Okay, 204. I made these notes probably 10 years ago while living on City Island and watching New York recover from 9/11. So he says, a good demonstration of the rationale of this piecemealing of the personality for attack was given the other day by a caricaturist. I'll do that again. A good demonstration of the rationale of this piecemealing of the personality for attack was given the other day by a caricaturist. He divided his celebrated victims into their young and old selves. In this way, he had them in half, like hydras, and made the angry tail discourse with the fiery head. Made the angry tail discourse with the fiery head. But you can effect far more than this. He said, but you, the reader, can effect far more than this. You can, with luck, cut men up so thoroughly that they become almost, quote, 6 months men, unquote, as they might be called, rather than men of one continuous personal life. Then life men. What's that? Rather than men of one continuous personal life, then left men. So you become 6 months men as opposed to one person your whole life. So you become somebody for about 6 months, then you change. He says, it is only necessary to mention the central subject of the very effective and fashionable plays of Pirandello to show how, systematically presented in a dramatic form, this segregation of the selves in quotes, of which the personality is composed, can affect the public mind. I'll read that again. It is only necessary to mention the central subject of the very effective and fashionable plays of Pirandello to show how, systematically presented in a dramatic form, this segregation of the selves of which the personality is composed can affect the public mind. But there's no way in which people differ, however minutely, that does not supply material for a war. War in quotes. And the general contention throughout this essay is that they cannot have too much of class in quotes, that people's passion for class and for reposing their personality in a network of conventional classification is not often realized. Where war is concerned, you must of course disregard entirely the humanitarian standpoint. Passively, men may even enjoy war, as the bird enjoys being drawn irresistibly to the fang of the snake. The blowing off of heads and arms is a very secondary matter with the majority of people, but that does not justify you as a responsible ruler in abusing this insensitiveness. Let's see the last paragraph. When really well mixed into a good, strong group, men are so many automata, they hardly notice any disturbance, like a war, but that the conscious self, insofar as it remains, of the average human being is terribly bloodthirsty and combative. Much as I should like to, I find it difficult to credit. By themselves, people. So this is, just to remind you, this is The Art of Being Ruled. Came out in 1926. And McLuhan said this book was as important as Machiavelli's The Prince. So this was the first important statement after 400 years of Machiavelli. So, and it is a good book. So I read the sentence, but that the conscious self, insofar as it remains of the average human being, is terribly bloodthirsty and combative. Much as I should like to, I find it difficult to credit. So he seems to be saying that the human being isn't really bloodthirsty and combative, or the conscious self isn't. Then he says, in italics, by themselves, people are, everyone admits, averse to fighting. It demands too much energy. Perhaps a really perfect group or class to prevent itself from dying of inanition or silliness would favor war as a stimulant. But I think the more the question is examined, the more certain it is that people, for themselves, not for others, they enjoy seeing other people fighting and dying naturally, and in the mass, so for themselves and living in the mass, prefer eating, sleeping, fornicating, and playing games of skill to killing each other. They prefer all that to killing each other. And even if the happiness of the greatest number, that's italicized, and even if the happiness of the greatest number is not so individual a matter as Bentham supposed, even if the happiness of dying, let alone living, with a huge crowd of people must have a serious claim on our attention, nevertheless the individual, betrayed momentarily by some class or etiolation of the communistic medium, does object very strongly to dying. As an individual, he is all for not dying or being crippled. That is the law of nature. And the ruler who bases his action on the stability of this artificial man of communism constantly risks sinning against God. So, this is when he was writing about leftist literature and anarchist literature. You know, he does right-wing literature in the 30s, but this is in the 20s. So he's well read in all the works of the left. So that last sentence, even if the happiness of the greatest number is not so individual a matter as Bentham supposed, even if the happiness of dying, let alone living with a huge crowd of people, must have a serious claim on our attention, nevertheless, the individual, betrayed momentarily by some collapse or etiolation of the communistic medium, to use the word medium, does object very strongly to dying. So where's that? The individual objects to dying. As an individual, he is all for not dying or being crippled. That is the law of nature. And the ruler who bases his action on the stability of this artificial man of communism constantly risks sinning against God. So I don't know what Lewis is talking about, but he's warning.
He's very dramatic.
He's very dramatic about something about the communist medium, and the individual does not objects very strongly to dying. So
it's interesting because we're talking about how we put our power outside ourselves, and then the following state is the state of the art of being ruled.
That's right.
So what does he say about that?
Well, because the guff was emptying, and he not necessarily put it in those terms, but everything was upside down in the electric age. The communistic medium, he could be referring to radio. So because everything is backwards and the rulers are using different ways of maintaining their authority, he said it requires a different approach. Usually, literate man would not, allow himself to be ruled. He was a great individualist as much as he could be. But when you're up against a discarnate electrified situation, what Lewis called the magnetic city, you have to apply a different strategy. So that's why it was quite shocking for people to read or see the headline, "The Art of Being Ruled." Nobody was in the mood of being ruled in the 1920s, but of course, mass man's always a loser and always out of touch with what's going on. So they were getting ready to be individual and not be ruled. And Lewis says, wait a minute, your images of what's being ruled, and what is rulership, is a lot different today. So
yes, but on the one hand, there was this communist in the media, the electric media, like McLuhan said, Marx didn't saw that, but there were all these dictators at that time.
Mm. Well, that's why you would be careful. You could easily be killed for no reason. There was a lot of people being killed by death squads and mean people with no manners. Sort of like Mexicans.
Yeah, but it's funny how, for example, with the Android meme...
It was Mexico all over Europe, man.
With the Android meme, there's also this democratization, decentralization of power. But
it wasn't the Android meme yet. I would say
No, but I'm commenting on the now, how people... there is all this decentralization of power, and at the same time there is this meme of the Big Brother, the Illuminati, and the control.
Yes,
and
both at the same time. So Lewis was bringing in a tactile sensibility. The trend was to enhance your individuality a little bit, at least among the artists in his time of the 20s. But he knew the complementary mass Big Brother crushing of the individual was also happening. So he was looking for a tactile relationship. Be the individual, be the mass, go back and forth. So I will see, let's see, Wyndham Lewis is anti-average, 231. See what this is. So amazing. I remember the headlines, but I don't remember the details. But it's small print. It's a lot of words, and it's 300, almost 400 pages long. 231. 231. Bottom. Okay, Lewis says, with the artist alone are we safe in that respect. He has no need, we know, of our real and living blood and real tears. But most men of science are not artists. They do need these realities to play with. From this it will be seen how we prepare our own destruction when we lose our sense for people, or deliberately destroy it in the interest of an abstraction. The one and only, equal and undivided, human average. They seem to be subsets of the abstraction word. Why, as Peirce says, that'd be the famous Peirce, early semiotician, I guess in the 19th century. Here is Lewis quoting Peirce, and Peirce is like a standard person in academia that the teachers teach in linguistics or whatever. So maybe he was quite well known 80 years ago, but it's like he's writing about Zappa. It's something that's very prominent today. He's writing about 80 years ago when there was no Zappa. So why, as Peirce says, the very word average is a journalistic absurdity in its origin. He said, not asking, he's going, why, or, you know what? The very word average is a journalistic absurdity in its origin. That these things on the surface are different to what they are in the depths or the interior, and that we are surface creatures, is the truth that Nietzsche insisted on so wisely. All the meaning of life is of a superficial sort, of course. There's no meaning except on the surface. It is physiologically the latest, the ectodermic, that's the astral, and most exterior material of our body that is responsible for our intellectual life. It is on a faculty for exteriorization that our life depends. I read that last bit again. All the meaning of life is of a superficial sort, of course. There's no meaning except on the surface. It is physiologically the latest, the ectodermic and most exterior material of our body that is responsible for our intellectual life, It is on a faculty for exterioration that our life depends. Butler's swallowing of the oyster. He swallowed an oyster. To return to that shows us very well the nature of our problem. It is the separation of one organization from another, this merely exterior cuddling of which he speaks with irony, that constitutes our human nature. Love, as we discursively understand it, can only exist on the surface. An inch beneath and it is no longer love, but the abstract rage of hunger and reproduction, of which the swallowing of the oyster or the swallowing of the male by the female Epeira is an illustration. And it is the spirit of the artist that maintains this superficiality, differentiation of existence for us. Do that again. It is the spirit of the artist that maintains the superficiality, differentiation of existence for us. Our personal, our detached life, in short, in distinction to our crowd life. Remember Ian said that love is not an emotion. So the next paragraph, Lewis writes, where Julian Benda is discussing the emotional and hence decadent, imperfect, and romantic character. So Julian Benda is discussing the emotional character of most art today. Benda writes, quote, note also a strong emotion caused at the sight of this innate conjunction procured between the soul of the artist and that of the object, such as the sight of two people intimately embracing would awaken. Let us learn to recognize also in their will to install themselves inside things, a kind of thirst to sexually invade everything, to violate any intimacy and mix themselves in the most intimate recesses of the being of everything met. Now that's quoting Julian Benda. Then Lewis says, that describes admirably the spirit in which Butler's note on love and the oyster was written.
Yes, I'm thinking about the force field.
Yeah.
If
the final paragraph. Science, on its human, non-technical, philosophic side, tends to the reverse, then, of what is ideally the function of art, a function which, as Benda says, it has forgotten. Science is the science of the inside of things. There's your interior landscape. Art is the science of their outside. Art is the differentiator. Science is the identifier. Science would merge us into a mutually devouring mass. That's the electric technology that science is going to build. That is the ultimate tendency of religion, too, with its ends of the world and apocalypses. The pagan and the artist sensibilities on the side of life and is superficial, in the sense indicated above. Religion and the philosophy, or religion of science, are on the side of death. So he says religion and the philosophy of science, which he changes to the religion of science, are on the side of death and are impregnated with the romance of destruction. McLuhan would go on about that, the nihilism all around him in 1950.
I would like to comment something when he says...
Right, let me just say the last sentence. Hold your thought. The primitive Christian, the nihilist like Herzen, and the man of science of the type we've been discussing are all destructive first and foremost. Now that idea McLuhan develops in the 50s. He says that in his letter to Ezra Pound. The destruction, nihilistic men of science are around him. What do you call him? The Bruce Bickford? The Brick Bradford of cartoon books. So he says, the primitive Christian and the man of science of the type we've been discussing are all destructive first and foremost. They recommend or prophesy, each in his own way, the suicide of our race. That's the last line.
Yes, I wanted to comment how he says science is the interior, is like the eyes of the chemistries, and art is the outside, is the environment becoming art. And he was already seeing this hybrid of art and science actually being one, and how these things correspond. There is a correspondence in the inner and the outside.
Two sides of the coin. Well, that's a very good observation, young lady. You're looking very young behind the camera there. You look like a young student looking up at the professor and being so wise.
Yes, I told you I saw a friend from the school like 2 weeks ago, and she really said it was scary to see that I looked the same. And she was very serious when she said that.
Yeah, she hadn't seen you in years.
Yeah.
And you still look the same.
20
That's
years.
Scary. It's worse now. Now that you're on the drops, you hear that, people? She's on the drops. We sell the drops. You know, you could have youth. You can have the elixir of youth too. Just give Bob a call. You know, just email me at ion@howaddict.com, and you can have your friends getting worried and terrified that you look so young.
Experience the science, the chemistry.
Experience the science. What Lewis predicted. Lewis, we're reading the prophecy of the RNA drops. Let's see if there's a totally different thing. I have here Android meme over anthropomorphic physical, AM over AP, and I put user friendly in it. Now, how the hell does he relate to that? What am I seeing? So we should go to page 219 to see how the heck I see that in his writing. Let's see. What user friendly does it give the actual part of the page? Top. Okay, good. 219 at the top.
No, but that was something I was commenting before we started, that now that I am reading the interior landscape, after engaging what you say about McLuhan, and you go back and read Joyce or Wyndham Lewis, you will have a total different epiphany. And that's something you're always saying. Like, listen to Bob, but then go and read the books yourselves, because then when you know the Ionic ideas, you get a total different understanding of what these poets, rhapsodes were saying, and you get really to see how the language is a non-stop creation from the fall until Bob is the only creation that hasn't stopped, and is the thing that links everything and contains everything, and that's the fascinating thing to see.
Yes, human speech. I will start a little bit on page 218. Now this is titled The Homo, the Child of the Suffragette. So the homosexual, the child of the suffragette. So he says down the bottom, the difficulty lies then in 1, the propaganda for sensation, 2, the propaganda against the intellect, 3, the imitation of the intellect and of the things of the intellect by all that is most deeply committed to pure sensation, and 4, the movement to merge cleverly these opposites and pretend that they are one, forcing what has outstripped the human sensational average to return on its steps and put itself at the service of what it had labored to transcend. So he's objecting to the return to acoustic space. Are you prompted to say something? Or are you just smiling wisely to yourself?
Now I understand Ian, that he was always talking about the frequencies. And for example, McLuhan makes this metanoia of the acoustic space and the visual space, in which is the frequency and the light that in your quadrant is tactile. It's the new synesthetic that embodies both, and it's like the big note Frank Zappa was talking about. Is the note made not only of sound, but is also the light, all the frequencies together. And I think that's what Ian was referring to, the frequencies and the tonalities.
Okay. So continuing in part 4, where the difficulty lies, the 4th aspect, the movement to merge cleverly these opposites and pretend that they are one, forcing what has outstripped the human sensational average to return on its steps and put itself at the service of what it had labored to transcend. So I read that before. Then it says, the strangest contradiction of all is that every movement away from the intelligence, and how can the term intelligence be dissociated from intellect? Question mark. But anyways, the strangest contradiction of all is that every movement away from the intelligence is encouraged in the name of intelligence. That is the secret of the difficulties that most people experience in analyzing this order of things. The male invert fashion is not by any means favorable to the woman, of course, although it is feminist. But on the other hand, it is hostile to many things to which the average woman is hostile. Through it, the stupider, more excitable and aggressive kind of woman will revenge herself on those things towards which she has always been in a position of veiled hostility, or on people she has come to regard as responsible for their misfortunes. It is often said that the male invert shelters himself behind, uses and acts through women. Reading of the game. It is often said that the male invert shelters himself behind women, uses and acts through women. But it would be equally true to put it the other way around. There are 2 snobberies that exercise a very great leverage in all sex fashion. Intellectual snobbery is very powerful. That's in quotes. Intellectual snobbery is very powerful. As has just been pointed out, it is on the score of intelligence that extreme sex revolution is effected. So it's in the realm of intelligence where the real sex takes place. Social snobbery also plays a great part. To boldly concentrate on a less humdrum practice where your pleasures are concerned has always been, you are reminded, the habit of the privileged few. Membership of the highest or richest organized society, reflecting the egalitarian revolutionary glare from the masses beneath, while floating like a sumptuous emanation at a safe distance above them, is essential. Membership is essential. Now, I have not joined the GUF. I better sign up. Someone told me to join a chat line today. So then he says, to be revolutionary, yet a social snob, to be an intelligent snob, and yet to run sensation against intellect to sniff and curl the lip at the advantages of the intellect, such are the contradictory habits that go hand in hand. That's Wyndham Lewis. Okay, so I don't think I should go on reading. Where's the excitement in that? So,
well, but this subject of men and women and the engaging that is changing as the womb is closing. There's going to be like a new revolution in the genders.
There's going to be a new physical, a new non-physical, and a new labyrinth of the mind.
And the roles of what men and women were supposed to do, women having the children and men providing, that has already been changing, but this is going to be a fact that these roles are not needed anymore.
Right. McLuhan said that he called it unisex in the 60s. So you now have these kids not identifying with their gender. I don't even know if you could say that they are unisex. They seem to be indifferent to the sexual aspect, though I'm not up on them, but I'm saying that to make a consistent argument that they're not that involved in their physical.
Yes, I think that's exactly that point will be one of the main changes in
the womb is closing.
Yes, because the whole conception of what a woman or a man is obsolete.
Right.
We are gods that can do and have anything they want, and don't need to engage to feel complete. They will engage what Ion calls the force field, but not in romantic relationships or relationships of dependence or...
What do they call that? Codependency?
Yes.
So, many people have said that over the last 100 years. There have been many movements toward that liberation. All of them inspired by the electric age, beginning with the telegraph. And you see people still want to have a special relationship. They still go for it. I wonder if they're going to get destroyed.
But I mean, before people were talking about the women liberating themselves, but I think it's both genders liberating.
It seems to me that Ion, if anybody is articulating where this post-gender, transgender scene is going, Ion has talked about that with the best words. And throughout the many years, Ion's talking about people not identifying with their chemical 3D body. And the kids are emphasizing that. Let me see where this goes. This is another essay. It's called Science and the Feminine. So, the puritanic potentialities of science have never been forecast. If it evolves a body of organized rights and is established as a religion, hierarchically organized, things more than anything else will be done in the name of decency. The coarse fumes of tobacco and liquors, the consequent tainting of the breath and staining of white fingers and teeth, which is so offensive to many women, will be the first things attended to. A scantling of the immaculate, non-carnal world of the future can be examined on all sides today. He wrote that. A scantling of the immaculate, non-carnal world of the future can be examined on all sides today. That's like quadrophenically. So he says, Two ideas of freedom are involved in these opposite principles of the mechanical disposal of the detritus of life and the natural disposal of the same. A philosophy of dirt, which is a tract which should be added to Messer Kegan-Paul's series. So I guess he was a teacher at Cambridge. But Hans Selye, a doctor in McGill University in Quebec, developed this whole theory about disease as responding to dirt. And here's Lewis talking about this, 60 years before, 80 years before. There's some interesting overlap. It's like if you had a book. Okay, that's not the metaphor. You have these intestines all winding over each other. In there is an experience on page 20, but right beside it, because the intestine from the later pages is intertwining, so it's laying right beside the 1920 scene, even though it's 2015. So he says, my headset keeps falling off. He says, two ideas of freedom are involved in these opposite principles of the mechanical disposal of the detritus of life and the natural disposal of the same. A philosophy of dirt would oppose nature to art, the ancient or animal world to the non-animal world of science. What we still call art is the science of the ancient world, that of nature. Hear that? What we still call art is the science of the ancient world, that of nature. Michelangelo, aside from his primitive Titanism, would be a suitable hero for such a philosophy, which would dwell on the admirable picture of this ancient master engaging in his yearly change of boots and nether garments, which never quitted his body except to make way for a new outfit. We are told that when he pulled them off, the skin used to come away with them. This would be Michelangelo, I guess. His colossal prophetic images and scenes of the first creation and his rough personal habits would provide the requisite background for that thought that gave its preference to the natural. It would be contrasted with the world of the conventionality of the feminine. Go do that again. It would be contrasted with the world of the microscope and the miniature and tidiness that have been a preserved conventionally of the feminine. That squeamishness, suggesting physiologically a bad conscience, that squeamishness of the woman, always heading to some aesthetic ritual of orderly automatism, would be there opposing the animal Saint-Jean of the workman of the early world. I don't know, maybe I'll show footage of that. They were there. Seems that back in the 50s, I was always stepping into it. Whatever I moved towards, apparently there was a Rotary or a Kiwanis or Chamber of Commerce moving it, limiting it to efficient causality. So Lewis ends his essay. Surgical cleanliness, developing its rights, is most religiously accepted by women. The liaison between the woman and applied science is as evident as the aesthetic tendencies of science and the puritanic standards that must ensue as its organization grows. It is science that will lay by the heels the last descendants of the, quote, colossal, impetuous, adventurous wanderer of the early world, as well as the animally working pre-industrial man. So, reading that again, it is the science that will lay by the heels the last descendants of the colossal impetus, adventurous wanderer of the early world, as well as the animally working pre-industrial man, substituting the machine, as well as the anomaly working pre-industrial man, substituting the machine of far greater power than any animal or titan. Controlled by some creature, ectogenically produced, with a small, beardless, shaven head. Very fussy about specks of dust and dirt, very partial to cosmic studies. That was Zappa's complaint when Gale released the album, or almost released it without his signature. So he's describing that right here. That is the logical forecast from the tendency of the moment. But of course, there are so many things may interfere with this that there's as much chance of its not reaching its goal as of its doing so. That's important. So many things may interfere with this. Indeed, what is suggested here with every possible apology for its flagrant optimism is that it will probably not happen. That is not the sort of world that will necessarily ensue. It is the nightmare, nothing more, that the present tendencies would predict if literally worked out. Their realization would imply, however, that people had ceased to be conscious personalities. The world would, in that case, have melted into inanity. It is only a question of being pessimistic enough, or irreconcilable and thorough enough in your revolutionary zeal. If you do that, you will find yourself quite naturally emerging into the region of healthy optimism prescribed here as a change from the unwholesome reality of the moment. Now you're over there doing your own research.
Yes, well, for me it's quite interesting that he saw how progress will end progress. And he had also this idea that technology is a result of art. And he also thought America was a laboratory of the ahistoric man, the man that is finally outside this cycles
outside of history. Yeah, ahistoric.
And in a way, he was seeing the ionic, this merging of art and science
and commerce and religion. And religion.
And
all of it merged.
And in the interior landscape, he says he has developed formulas for the control of the material world and then applying this to the control of the human mind.
Who's saying that?
I think McLuhan about...
okay, could you read that again? So that's McLuhan just saying that Lewis is in charge. Read that part of that back.
Yeah. He's talking about how men create patterns and formulas. And I think you have a right to the epitome of that. And
you have a what?
To the epitome of the patterns and the formulas.
I mean the epitome. Epitome of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Not the epitome. I mean, come on. The Spanish say that, but geez, English is the universal language. Epitome. The epitome.
Well, sometimes I say the words more like in Latin, and that's why we
right.
don't agree. So,
you are the linguist.
Okay.
You may be right.
I'm going a little backwards to what McLuhan said. Whereas the modern artist has used his factive or creative intelligence to manipulate matter and experience into a pattern which could arrest the mind in the presence of a particular aspect of existence, the modern scientist has sought to merge the functions of the primitive and civilized magicians. He has developed formulas for the control of the material world and then applied these to the control of the human mind. He invades the human mind and society with his patterned information. That is the key to the nature of the new mass media. So he's seeing how the magic, the art, the science, the medias are all
a ritual.
Yes, the magic, what we call the magic, the fragmented power we put outside.
Yes. That was McLuhan's summary in his essay on Wyndham Lewis.
Yes, he
That was written in the 50s.
Yes, he's talking about how art supplanted magic, and then what is happening with technology and medias that he got from Wyndham Lewis.
Yes, yeah.
All these basic concepts that he went on to explore.
Apply them. Lewis saw it, Joyce and McLuhan applied it. I wonder if there's anything else to say about Lewis. There's a lot probably about his difficult relationship with James Joyce. He fought World War One. He went through that hell. Actually, he didn't experience hell. He had the painting commission, so he was making paintings, documenting the war landscape.
Yes, but in a way it's interesting because the war actually liberated society from the feudal systems. The servants.
What'd you say?
The servants and the peasants were somehow liberated from that organization with the war. They could
Yes.
start making a living doing something else besides serving the aristocrats.
Yeah, my old friend Margaret Lloyd lived in the rich part of Philadelphia. She was the seventh descendant of Benjamin Franklin on the female side. But she said it was a shock after World War II, not World War I, but at least in the United States, after World War II, the rich people like her family couldn't find help. The people weren't going to do that anymore.
Yes, and you see that in the Downtown Abbey, the TV.
Yes, it's showing that.
And well, I find it very interesting how things that we may think are bad, like war at the end, have an effect that has to do with this decentralization of power that is part of the Ionic Galaxy becoming the environment.
The decentralization. Lewis had a lot of angst about all this. His writing is so detached and perceptive, but he personally, I think, was very, very agitated by all that was going on. That's why he would phone people up randomly with a telephone, interrupt their breakfast, berate them with Bob knowledge.
Well,
he quoted Sun Ra. He said, Sun Ra, someday a voice will come and will speak to humanity. You should prepare.
He was being a prophet, like
yes,
telling the people the message that he thought an artist has to express to the little man. And it's like it's like you haven't stopped in your
declarations. Rhapsode, yes. I'm a rhapsode people.
But Ion told you you're just talking to 1%. And it's better so, because the mass means the obsolescence.
Delusion, masses, delusion. You only want to do the mass if you're some person working in a crummy job and you don't see economically you're ever going to get out of that grind. That would motivate forming a band, getting a great hit, and then making some money. So So that pop culture is a matter of survival in the way you're rewarded, the archetypes of survival.
But
But
now that you are aware of all these, what will be your version of the art of being unruled?
good question. The art of being unruled, the art of being ruled. Well, it's the art of showing up to do payday, to be responsible. So I'm ruled by my sense of responsibility for the shows, payday and what the youth. But I don't see any kind of rulership possible. I don't have to worry about being ruled. There is no ruling going on. There may be taxes, but I'm not worried about somebody, sort of arresting you.
But sometimes I wonder what is the motivation you have to do all the things you are doing for so long non-stop.
Well, here's what I think I'm doing. I think I've got, as McLuhan would say, I was a lucky person and I met a lot of people. So I read a lot of ideas, a lot of quotes. I basically said, I want you to hear something you never would hear before, an explanation, a pattern, non-physical speaking, which is ion. Basically, I'm an entertainer of what the mind and ear can hear. I do that. I play off different personalities of myself in the audience against the audience, for the audience, to have them hear a connection of thoughts, a juxtaposed pattern that never would happen to them otherwise. So I am trying to be original in providing acoustic or verbal content. That's my main enjoyment. That's what I've been doing for a long time. Like I said, let's play Dr. Beater recordings on the radio. No one's ever heard this crazy stuff by Beater. And, it's not to be silly stuff. Silly, it doesn't do anything. These have to be people who have integrity, who have built up a huge perspective, even though it's not believed. That certainly fits the description of Sherman Skolnick, Mae Brussel, and Dr. Beater and Lyndon LaRouche. So I wanted the Toronto audience to hear these people. I knew they would never hear them. They wouldn't be inclined to find out about them. And then, for many years, I also could add McLuhan. Nobody really heard good McLuhan. Then, when I was with James Martinez, from 2008, July 2008 till into 2010, I was able to talk without interruptions and say things. I myself would be the novelty. I would come up with things that would be novelty. Now, you heard that. You heard those talks by me, and you told me that you were amazed at the patterns I would make. So you're saying that I was successful in making you hear things you never heard before.
Yes, and I was very amazed from the coherence of the whole things you were presenting. And for example, yesterday, as I was reading the interior landscape, the part in which McLuhan talks about Joyce and how Joyce knew a lot about language. He really studied language, every aspect of language, of linguistics. He was aware of all the different studies.
Different original scripts, the runes, the ideograms, the syllabaries.
Yes,
yeah, he read the history of language.
The archaeologies of alphabets and many things. And I had this epiphany of how, for example, you are the voice of this grammarian tradition. And for me, that's when I'm amazed that, as we said before, language is the only creation of humans that hasn't stopped from the
Day one.
Yes, it has been non-stop. It's the amazing work of everybody. It's the
Right. Yeah.
space of the decentralization of power.
Yes. I'm trying to be an anti-environment to that collective sleep, collective creation. I'm not a historian of language. I'm presenting eccentric almost ideas. And what was a great thrill was to have something pop out of that, ion, where I did not have to speak. Ion did the speaking. And over the last 30, 40 years, what do you call that? Unquestionable that nothing has said as many original ideas as Ion has said. It's the most interesting creative patterns of new thoughts that people haven't thought of ever.
Yes, and for example, in the chart, the fact that you are presenting the different quadrants and you associate things to the different quadrants, this music and these symbols and these different things, it's reminds me of what Ulysses or Joyce was trying to do in the Ulysses.
Yeah.
But it's not a fiction. It's something that has so much logic in it, so much knowledge, that one wonders what is the function of this creation, of this work. And then, as you said, it was the Ionic coming forth.
The combination. I'm now saying that we must describe Ion as a talking hologram, not any other words. People like to think Ion is channeling through JW, but that's not happening. I've seen Ion as a hologram, so just think of that. We have a talking hologram floating around, available to communicate.
And in a way, you created it.
I did.
And can you explain that hologram? What do you understand from the hologram, or what?
Well, I know Ion is not limited to the hologram, but that is where our technology is going to, is to be a hologram, a simulation of yourself or of other things. So Ion wants to be a bit ahead of the curve and do it first. So we are trying to be the first in everything. And so let's acknowledge Ion as a hologram, talking hologram. You know, I did say on the McLuhan on Maui series for the 2011 centenary of McLuhan, I described the first time we presented Ion, I said, the new environment, the new hidden ground has come forth. But for the first time, the new hidden environment is aware of the effects it's creating. That was new. And so how does it communicate its awareness of effects? It talks. It talks to us, telling about the environment it is and that it's creating. But television never talked to us. Books never talk to us like that as a distilled, terrible crystal. Look up Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 22. But so this terrible crystal that Ion is, like chromosome 14, you can be thrilled at it or you can be frightened. So it seems pretty logical to me. I was saying 20 years ago that the electric environment is going to change the astroplane. And that's literally what Ion is. It's the non-physical, Ion wouldn't call itself the astroplane, but in our esoteric knowledge systems, they call it the astroplane. So this non-physical comes forth and is forced to be non-physical, to be creative. That is a change in the astral plane. Now that's pretty astounding that I was saying that on radio shows 25 years ago. What is 25? 1990? Yes, 25 years ago. I was saying it in 87, 88, 89. So going on 30 years.
Yes,
So it's a great example of saying something and it coming forth, evoking it.
because until now,
And remember, I did not have a purpose for it. I just said this was happening. I didn't lay out an agenda about it. I didn't say, I'm going to do this. I just declared it with a kind of purity, with an indifference almost. That's the quality that makes it happen, because I didn't require it to happen.
yes, and until now we thought only humans were engaging language.
Mm.
And then this thing called non-physical starts talking and creating. And they say we are becoming the light. And if holograms are light, then I can see how we will merge with that hologram when we become the light.
Well, you will merge with your ability to make the hologram. Let's say it that way. You won't necessarily have to merge with any hologram made by ion or anything else. You will have the ability to create a hologram. You will be able to relive my life and be and feel what it's like to be me.
But like there's a lot of explanations every Monday on Caroline's show about the changes occurring on the physical body.
Yes.
And I always wonder what are the changes occurring on the hologram, of the ionic hologram.
Well, I am saying that the main effect of the change is that the regular cloud, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates cloud, will crash, will obliterate itself. But that our records, our recordings, will be on another cloud that Ion's preparing, making, and they will be preserved. That's something that you made me say that. What did you say to evoke that? Did you mention prophecy?
No, the changes in the ionic. What are they as non-physical experiencing?
Right. Now, they say that when you have your own hologram, people want to be Marilyn Monroe and these famous Hollywood celebrity kind of lives. That's what people are going to have them make themselves. Act out or somehow virtual space. So they experience what it is, all the emotions, I guess, being Marilyn Monroe. I'm saying that in hundreds of years, people will want to be I want to live Bob's life. I want to be born in 1922. I want to meet Hitler in 1936.
I want to taste the ice cream.
Yeah. I want to hang out with Carolyn. I want to be with Carolyn. And they'll all simulate it. Meanwhile, they'll have lost track of me. They won't know where I am. They won't know what I did do later. They'll know up to now. Yes, it'll be quite obvious. It's on recording. Much has been explained. But will they find out what I did after? Will they?
It's the most amazing science non-fiction, art science non-fiction.
Yes, it's crash fiction. It's crash theory.
And it's true.
Made alive, and it's true, And you're just an Illuminati bitch, a ninny, who echoes what I say.
In amazement.
Yeah, totally hypnotized. In the patriarchal era, it was Scheherazade, a woman telling stories to the sheik so that she wouldn't be oft decapitated. But it's reversed now in the new age where so-called women are in charge, where I have to keep up the stories or I'll be decapitated or some other kind of appendage will be knocked off if I don't keep you entertained. We must keep Echo entertained. The Mexican princess must be entertained
No,
with stories.
I'm so amazed at the whole things I understand and I can see and all these patterns.
So take the book and make the pose you have in your picture. That's up on Facebook. You're sitting there with the book. Yes, it's quite far away from your face. You're reading Bob's diary. It's Bob's diary is the content of that book.
The
Yes, There's MM on the cover if you don't see it. You show them the cover. Maybe they've seen it.
Yes, I did insert it on the Ionic Galaxy videos.
Okay, so I must prepare for my conversation with Dave Neufeld and his friends.
Yeah.
And then after that, my conversation with Snore, Znore, and we'll see how much he's ready for the implications of what his column is about.
Yes.
Right? He's walking right up to Bob's doorstep. Fine student of the drama of cognition as presented by McLuhan and the Android meme. Let's see if he's open to the implications of what we call it, the implications of the most phenomenal story ever.
McLuhan Moonchild.
Yes, the actual Moonchild, the real Moonchild, the actual
enemy of the stars.
The most amazing story a human could ever have lived. Someone said that on the show. Maybe Debbie of Boston says, "You've had an extraordinary life, Bob. What a life!" And I said, "Yes, it's probably the greatest life that any human ever had." Imagine saying that.
Yes.
Could I say that on Charlie Rose? Would I be allowed to say that? Would I have death threats for the rest of eternity if I said that in a medium that had broadcast to millions of people? We will see someday, I'm sure, the effect of that.
Well, the greatest work of creating a new type of energy and a new environment. That's
undeniable.
Undeniable. That's why I had this vertigo when I started taking the drops. I was vomiting because I was like aware of all this amazing end, the end of progress, the end of this.
The end of everything.
The end of the beginning is like.
It was quite dramatic, your response. Vomited for a year.
No, it was like a month.
Oh, a month.
Yes.
Well, okay, there it is. I think that's an easy record to break, so I hope one of our listeners will be able to vomit for at least 2 months.
Yes, okay, thanks a lot.
But as for now, Roxy is the #1 champ of
grammatical exegesis. Yes, it was like eating the environment and getting rid of all the intoxication.
When I was in Toronto last September, a year ago, with Bob Marshall, we were in this I took him out to dinner, a very classy restaurant, and with Steve Reimer, who does the timeline. And every now and then, Ed, that's his real name, he would go, right in the restaurant. Right, other people could hear it, One of the funniest performers I've ever seen.
Well,
You know, he's doing that and I'm falling on the floor laughing my head off.
we are still applauding.
That's right, yep. Okay, I say thank you. Thank you for not chopping my head off.